Hi everyone, I'm Tiffany Benson, one part of Team Benson, and today my desert garden is about to get super hot. Pretty much like 100 degrees hot. Let's go. So we all know Arizona gets pretty hot during the summer. It also gets pretty hot before the summer actually starts. This week we are hitting the 90s, and then later on, I think probably a little bit earlier next week, we'll be hitting the 100s. We have kind of like a fake summer type deal where it'll get super hot and then it might cool down a little bit early May, and then it'll start getting warm again. Well, it's time. It's time for it to get hot. So there's going to be a lot of summer gardening problems that we are going to talk about today. So we're going to take a walk around the garden. I already have some of those summer gardening problems happening, and I'll show you guys what they are so that you guys know what to do for your gardens, whether you're in Arizona or if it's going to be later in the season wherever you're at. But first, I want to say a big thank you because I got mail. I got mail, guys. It's my first mail to my garden. I'm pretty excited about it. So I want to say a big thank you to Marlene. She sent me some acorn seeds, which acorn squash is something I've never tried before to grow in my garden. I do have some great recipes for it. So probably about fall, I'm going to try those and grow them. If I get an open trellis, I'll probably try them earlier than that too as well to kind of see how they grow. And then also I want to say a big thank you to Sarah. She sent me a card, and then she also sent me some lettuce seeds. I'm so excited. Thank you so much, Sarah. I had mentioned that Mr. Benson was kind of upset because I told him no more Taco Tuesday since my lettuce bolted, and she sent me some lettuce seeds. So I'm going to try planting some in a part of my garden that gets a little bit more shade for the summer, and fingers crossed, but I'm also going to start some inside so that we can continue this Taco Tuesday and keep it going. So, but let's get up here and take a walk, and I'm going to show you some of the problems that you guys might be facing in your desert gardens and some of the things that you might be facing later on if you live in another climate that gets hotter later on. So let's take a walk. Okay guys, so the first thing we're going to talk about is sun. So Arizona can reach degrees all the way up until like 120 during the big part of the summer. So sun skull is something that I get a lot of in my garden. I probably should have had my shade cloth up probably about a week ago, but I've been busy with work. For those of you guys that don't know, I own a PR marketing firm with small businesses, and right now all of my clients are a little bit in chaos. So it's been harder to come out and film. But I want to get my shade cloth up today. Now before you start throwing up shade cloth everywhere, you want to kind of track where the sun is. So my morning sun is coming in over here. So all of this is still shaded, and all of this is in morning sun right now. So eventually the sun is going to change when it gets later in the summer, and the sun is going to come up from this side and shade this side. But for right now, all of the morning sun is coming up here. So by the time the heat of the day comes around, this part is actually going to be in shade, which is one of the reasons why I planted my pole beans here too as well. So do I actually need a lot of shade cloth up on this spot right now? No, I don't, because I do have a lot of summer crops that are coming in. Now the important thing is just to watch your garden and see if you're not hitting those high temperature times, so that you want to make sure that you have definite summer crops in those high temperature times that can take the heat and provide them shade cloth when they need it. So over here, I probably will be putting up shade cloth. Okay, so this bed is actually getting a lot more sun than the bed out there because the sun stays up higher over here a lot longer. So one of the things that's happening to my plant is, as you can see here, it is getting burned. So this is not a disease, this is not a bug, this is actually sun skull. And the sun skull is burning the leaves. Even here, it's burning the leaves, and they're just kind of breaking off. So what I'm going to do to prevent this is I'm actually going to put up a big umbrella, and so that I don't have to put shade cloth on this bed, I'm going to put up a big giant umbrella that's going to provide shade for this bed and then also this bed. Now this one I'm probably going to put a shade cloth over just because it'll be able to be its own separate thing. Now the umbrella is also going to provide shade cloth for this area too as well. As you guys can see, this one really got affected by the sun. Now because this is in a pot and it's going to dry out a lot quicker, I'm actually going to move this one with the beans in it because they do not like taking hot heat. As you can see, these beans are really affected. These are the first two leaves, so they kind of fall off anyway, but I don't want sun skull to be really ruining this plant. And as you can see over here, they're affected, but my basil isn't actually doing too bad. So it can actually stay over here and just get some shade, and so can the sage. The sage can stay over here and get some shade too as well. So the second problem you might see in your garden, which I don't really have any quite yet, comes from not watering your plants at the base. And this happens a lot to your cucumber plants and your squash plants, where you get a powdery mildew on your plant. So basically that's you spraying water just over the top like you would do for your winter garden, where you can just hose it down, and it's actually nice to be able to spray things and caterpillars off of the leaves. But you don't want to do that with your summer garden. Your squashes and your cucumbers hate having their leaves wet. So do your tomatoes. Tomatoes can get blight, which I don't have any in my garden to show you, but they can get blight, and they can also, in your cucumbers and your squash can get powdery mildew. So how you prevent that is you water at the base of the plant. So these plants are my squash plants. They don't have any powdery mildew. They are starting to get a little bit of sun skull, but they don't have any powdery mildew, which I'm excited about that. So what I'm doing to prevent that is I'm watering at the base of the plant and making sure that I don't get the leaves wet. It does take me a lot longer to water my summer garden versus my fall garden, but it's worth it when you don't have a garden full of powdery mildew. Now the next thing I want to talk about is garden nutrition. So your fall garden versus your spring or versus your winter garden is going to need a lot more nutrition because they're making big giant fruits. You know, some of these plants are going to be making cantaloupe, some are going to be making watermelon. I have eggplants, I have cucumbers, I have beans that need to produce tons of beans, and squash. So they're going to need a lot of nutrients. So you want to make sure that you're providing that nutrients to your garden. One of the things that I use is compost. I get compost from the AZ Worm Farm. If you guys have watched my channel, you know that my garden thrives off of compost from the AZ Worm Farm. In fact, if you go there, they only use compost. They don't use anything else. I do use fish fertilizer probably about once a month, and you do it at night because otherwise your garden will be covered in flies because it is like, you know, ground up fish. So I do that once a month, but mainly I make sure all of my pots are topped off with compost so that they're getting that nutrients from the compost. And then I also get worm tea sometimes too as well from the worm farm and spray my plants down with that. Well, actually don't spray the plants, but water at the base of the plants with that as well. If we're looking at my eggplant, as you can see, it actually has an eggplant on it right there. And then it has a couple more coming in here too. All of these little ones are baby eggplants coming in. But you can see that I'm starting to get a little bit of yellow leaves. This is not a disease. This is actually just lack of nutrients in the soil for the eggplant. This eggplant has been in this pot for about a year and a half. And it's been producing eggplants every couple of months for a year and a half. And you can see that when you look in here, I can get my hand all the way down here before it touches the soil. So that is a lot of soil that has depleted out of this pot, meaning that there's also a lot of nutrients that's depleted out of this pot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all of the wood chips and add compost, not potting soil, but compost to the top of this, all the way up to the top of this pot. And then that's going to provide more food for this plant to keep growing. So the last thing I want to talk about, guys, is watering. Now, when it comes to my desert garden, my desert summer garden, water is important. When you look at a lot of big farmers or even homesteaders here in Arizona, one of the things that they do is they water with irrigation. So basically they turn a big hose on that pumps out through the city, and they just flood the entire land where there's going to be crops growing. And they do this, I think it's like once a month or once every couple of weeks. They do it before they plant, and then they do it as they plant too as well. And it basically just puts a big layer of water on the ground. I don't have irrigation being in the middle of the city, so I do that by watering my plants really, really deeply. So in the fall or the winter, well, the fall and the winter and sometimes the spring, I just kind of go through and hose everything. It probably takes me 20 minutes to water my whole garden. In the summer, on the other hand, I spend a lot more time making sure my big, heavy producing plants like my squash and my cucumbers get enough water, because they love water. So I actually section off each one of those and water each plant itself by putting the hose at the base of the plant for about a good 2 to 3 minutes on full blast while it's soaking in all of that water. This does deplete a lot of the nutrients out of the soil because it's going to get washed away. In my big beds, it's not really a big deal, but in my plants, like my eggplant, the soil level goes down. So the eggplant does need all that water, because in a pot, it's going to dry out. But I have to make sure that I'm constantly putting compost when it needs it, usually about once every 3 to 4 months. I'll layer it with compost so that then that nutrient is still in the soil. So watering, shade cloth, and composting, and making sure that you're watering at a good time, which for me, and I suggest watering in the beginning of the day before the sun hits its peak. If you're watering at the middle of the day when it's 100 degrees outside, the plant's hot, you're hot, the water's hot, and it's not going to really soak up anything. So you want to water in the early part of the morning when the sun is getting ready to come up or hasn't really peaked yet, and making sure that your plant can absorb all of that water. But if you guys do that, it's going to provide you a great garden in the desert when it's over 100 degrees. I promise. So if you guys have any questions, or if you guys have any tips that you would like to share too, feel free to put them down in the comments. I do get back to everybody and reply back to you guys. I've learned a lot, and I know you guys have been helping each other learn a lot too. Gardening in Arizona, it's a desert, guys, so as many tips as we can share with everybody, it's always nice, because then we can all get through and grow ourselves gardens. So don't forget to plant your garden out. It's gonna be hot this summer, but we're gonna get through it, and we're gonna have food, and it's gonna be nice. But remember, even a small space garden can provide you with tons of food. Bye, guys.